Hey movie fans, Demetri Panos back again for another retro rewind. We're still talking Halloween horror movies. Yes, I know, feels like forever. It's only been since mid-September. Started early because what the hell else are we going to talk about in the midst of a pandemic when we can't really go out to any Halloween horror haunts or trick-or-treating or any of that fun stuff this year? I know, a real bummer. So that means we get to talk horror movies for just a bit longer. Hey, these past few weeks, I've been talking about the Halloween franchise, perhaps my favorite horror franchise, and we're doing it the way that only Retro Rewind can do it. Starting from Halloween 2018, retro rewinding all the way back to where we'll end up in 1978. That'll be next week's episode. But for this week, I'm going to be talking about not one, but two movies. Not three movies like last week. Wow, that was exhausting, but I had a ton of fun doing it. But today, down to two, where I'll be talking about Halloween 2, the direct sequel to the original Halloween, and Halloween 3, the Season of the Witch, which is a direct sequel to nothing, really. So, why don't we get started, shall we? We will retro rewind back to October 22nd, 1982, for that's when Halloween 3, the Season of the Witch, was released. It was released by Universal Pictures. It had a budget of $2.5 million and did an estimated domestic box office of $14.4 million. It was directed by the original Halloween's production designer, Tommy Lee Wallace. He also had a hand in writing the movie as well. And it had Dean Cundy was yet again the DP for this movie, making the nighttime scenes and shadows look creepy, scary, and just all around awesome. Dean Cundy is one of the industry's best, in my opinion. But we pretty much jettison the cast of the Halloween movies, although some do show up in a little cameo and Easter egg-ish here, and I'll get to that in just a second. But we're going to start off with its main star, the great Tom Atkins. He played Dr. Daniel Chalice. Stacey Nelkin played Ellie Grimbridge, and Dan O'Herlihy plays Connell Cochran. Now, we also had Nancy Loomis played Chalice's estranged wife. She's in the movie. She comes over from Halloween and a brief appearance in Halloween 2. And she makes a brief appearance here. It's always nice to see the alums from the Halloween movies show up in other, let's say, Halloween movies. And not sure if you knew, but we also had a brief cameo from Jamie Lee Curtis. Yes, her voice is in Halloween 3, the Season of the Witch. She is an announcer, a town crier, let's say, and she's making the curfew announcement. And then Tommy Lee Wallace also has a minor appearance, or at least his voice is heard, for he is the commercial announcer, the Silver Shamrock commercial announcer, for that incessant jingle, that commercial jingle that you just can't get out of your head. And it is counted down throughout pretty much the entire movie, starting with like 14 days till Halloween, 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 2 more days till Halloween, Silver Shamrock. See, I only did one version of that for you. You get to hear about 20 as the movie counts itself down to Halloween. And don't forget to put on your Silver Shamrock masks. So last week, I talked briefly about Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, because it was the first of what would be 5 restarts for the Halloween franchise. Now, at the time last week, and you can go back to last week, and I do a complete breakdown of all of the restarts. And this is the episode in which it was the Jamie Lloyd trilogy, where I talk about Halloween's 4, 5, and 6. But Season of the Witch was the kickoff of it all. Tried to do something different at the time last week, and you can, again, just go back because it's on YouTube in perpetuity to catch and hear what I talk about all of the restarts. But specifically Season of the Witch, I called it a failed experiment. Yes, a failed experiment. Why did I call it a failed experiment? Well, let's look at the words failed experiment. Number one, failed. It was a failure, a miserable failure. At least that is how it was viewed by Universal Pictures at the box office. It didn't come close to the receipts that, well, the original Halloween pulled in and what Halloween 2 had pulled in. It was very paltry, and well, it's the measure of a movie, not just here domestically, but globally. Okay, it doesn't matter whether a movie is good or bad. It matters how it performs at the box office. What are the receipts? What can the studio gain from this? I'm going to have to throw in, what can the exhibitors get from it as well? Season of the Witch did not perform to anybody's expectations. In fact, they were far lower. Again, I say it was the first, and it could have been a nail in the coffin for the Halloween franchise itself. So it failed box office-wise. But why did I call it an experiment? Well, because it was. It was an experiment. As you Halloween fans know, pretty well known that John Carpenter himself pretty much didn't want to do any sequels to the original Halloween, let alone work his way up to a third Halloween movie. Deborah Hill, they had come up with an idea, and Tommy Lee Wallace is pretty much on board with this idea. And the idea was to release a horror movie every Halloween time. So in mid to late October, perhaps the week before Halloween, maybe even on Halloween, and it would be a Twilight Zone, night gallery, creep show kind of a movie. Not an anthology movie. It would be a complete standalone, but it could have a twist at the end, something like, say, like an Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where it would have a through-line narrative and then a cool twist throughout. It would be a horror movie that could also be set within the world of, say, Halloween. And so there would be a Halloween 3, a Halloween 4, a Halloween 5, and so on and so forth in these standalone movies. Now, the cool thing is, if any one of those movies were a success, they could have spawned their own sequels as well. And this was the idea. This was the experiment. The concept as to what was going on and what they were thinking. But they had one major problem to contend with. It was a really good idea, at least in my humble opinion, but there was no Michael Myers. Now, at that point in time, you had Halloween, which was huge at the time, huge. And then you had Halloween 2, which also did really well. Audiences wanted to come back for more Michael Myers. And then you're coming out and you're calling a movie Halloween 3 with no Michael Myers. Nothing actually related to the prior movies. And it was being marketed as Halloween 3. Now, the only semblance of Michael Myers in the movie is that from a time-wise, and the time when it was released, Halloween, the movie, was going to be on network TV on Halloween evening. So you caught glimpses of the television commercials promoting that Halloween was going to be on TV on Halloween night. And that's all we actually see of Michael Myers. Well, audiences and producers alike were not too thrilled with the idea. Even Tommy Lee Wallace says, yeah, we gave it a good old try. It wasn't the best idea at all. he does, in some way, he blames Universal for the way that they handle the marketing, but also producer Irwin Yablans. And he, in an interview, goes on to say that it was a really stupid idea not to have Michael Myers, but they kept on sending me huge paychecks. I kept on getting big checks, so what did I care? I'm going to pause right there for a second because last week I also talked about the breakdown of the studio system and how sometimes within a franchise you get some bad movies, right? Now, Irwin Yablans, you could point to what he says. I kept on getting big paychecks, so I just kept my mouth shut. I didn't care. They pretty much had written me out. It was Universal, was calling the shots. They kept paying me, so whatever. But it was a really dumb idea to make a Michael Myers movie. So, again, he could have maybe said something. Not sure that the folks at Universal would have listened, but he took the money and he ran. So, anyways, so there you have it. That is why it was an experiment. A couple of other changes too. We went from Haddonfield, Illinois to Northern California to the lovely coastal town, Santa Mira. And then we are introduced to Silver Shamrock. They are the makers of toys, but most famously make Halloween masks. And here is where the president of Silver Shamrock comes in, Connell Cochran. Toy maker, prank maker, witch. Huh? Yeah, he's a witch, a warlock. And he is set to pull the biggest prank on the kids and on the world on Halloween evening. So he will celebrate Halloween, or quote unquote, the Festival of Samhain. And I will quote, the last great one took place 3,000 years ago when the hills ran with the blood of animals and children, aka sacrifices. And Cochran goes on, it was a way of controlling our environment. It's time again. In the end, we don't decide these things, The planets do. They're in alignment. Does any of this sound familiar? If you tuned in last week when I was talking about 4, 5, and 6, sounds a little bit like Halloween 6 with there's Stonehenge involved, there's sacrifices, it's that time, the stars are in alignment. I don't know. Could be a little similarity there. But this movie also includes assassin robots stealing a stone from Stonehenge. Now that happens off screen, but they actually steal one of the Stonehenge stones, which is pretty cool, right? And it's in this warehouse, where in Santa Mira, this toy warehouse, and basically this stone carries a power within it, and when channeled, it's a power when ignited creates evil, horrifying transformation. Okay, so they're scraping off little pieces of Stonehenge, putting it in the Silver Shamrock like monogram, which is pasted onto the back of these rubber masks. They're really cool masks, by the ways. And I think you could probably get some from like Trick or Treat Studios or whatnot. But they are cool masks. They include a pumpkin, a skull face, and a witch. They are cool. And they have the Silver Shamrock emblem on the back, and they are being, these commercials are running, so like incessantly all up through Halloween, urging families, get your children these masks, sit them down in front of the TV at 9 o'clock because we're going to have a grand giveaway, and you'll see who wins. And basically, no good is going to happen at 9 p.m. So, and again, this is where we get the Silver Shamrock commercial, which runs through the entire movie. But we also meet our heroes of this movie. They get, Dr. Chalice actually gets dragged into the story while he's on a shift at the hospital. A person has come in. He's traumatized and he's clutching one of these masks. And away we go to try to solve the mystery of this gentleman who ends up getting murdered in the hospital. Great security there. And the murderer ends up killing himself in his car, lighting himself a fire, and it goes up into a fiery explosion. And the daughter of the man who was murdered, he and Dr. Chalice, they get together and go to Santa Mara to try to solve the mystery of the mask, so to speak. So, again, you get this whole thing, Silver Shamrock, broadcast on Halloween night, end of the world stuff, witchery, warlocky. It's pretty good B-movie, sci-fi, horror stuff. So, again, had it not been called Halloween 3, well, maybe it would have done something different. Who knows? So, all I can say is it is one of those movies, however, that with a lot of distance since the movie's opening, it is a pretty good B sci-fi horror flick. And who doesn't love them some Tom Thrill Me Atkins? Look, it's not a perfect movie. It's a B movie. For one, the movie does not account for time zones, not just in the country, but around the world. So think of that as you're watching the movie. It's kind of pretty funny. But it has a nice little twist ending on Dr. Chalice. So that's pretty cool. The other thing the movie has, too, is some fun Easter eggs, if you're paying attention. So, for example, the opening. So just like Halloween and Halloween 2, before it, the Halloween 3 opening credit sequence involves a pumpkin. This one's being digitally created. Dr. Chalice prescribes giving a patient 100 cc's of Thorazine. Thorazine must be the popular drug of the time because that is exactly what Dr. Loomis prescribes or says to prescribe to Michael Myers before he's being brought up in front of a court judge. Also, Chalice's hotel neighbor, Marge, who meets an untimely demise because she plays around with the Silver Shamrock emblem. She mentions a mini Blankenship, not a Minnie Mouse, but a mini Blankenship. Minnie is a name. There is a Mrs. Blankenship in Halloween 6. I don't know why all roads go back to Halloween 6. It's kind of scary to me, but in any case, yes. So those are a couple of Easter eggs that I find to be fun while watching Halloween 3. And I also want to do a quick ode to the great Tom Atkins. This guy's been acting since 1963. And for many of you out there, he's a fantastic character actor. He works. He's a working actor. And there are many actors who could poo-poo the idea of being in a movie like Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, or The Fog, or Night of the Creeps, or My Bloody Valentine 3D. He was also in Lethal Weapon, amongst a ton of other movies. But not him. He wanted to work. He loved to work. And when you hear him talk about Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, he's actually grateful for the role. He's actually a proponent too. He says, it was a really good story. We had a really good time on set. So I find that to be pretty cool as well. I was going to impart with you too a story about the great Tom Atkins that I had because I think it's funny and I think it's endearing to Tom Atkins. And I wanted to try to bring in a friend of mine on this. See, this story takes place at the Halloween 35th anniversary convention, which took place up in Pasadena. My friend who I wasn't going to name, my friend Ryan, I wasn't going to name him, but I figure why not? He and I had the opportunity to meet Mr. Atkins at a preview night. You see, we bought tickets. We spent a little extra money to go to this preview night, which I believe was like on a Thursday. And, well, Mr. Atkins was there. And he was there to sign autographs, to take pictures, and just to be the nice guy that he is. So I'm going to see if I'm going to see if I can bring Ryan into this conversation. In any case, he was there to sign autographs. There wasn't anybody really around him at the time. And we figured, okay, I think Ryan had some Night of the Creeps things to sign, and I had the Fog. I had my Fog DVD to sign for him to sign. Well, it doesn't look like Ryan's going to be able to make it. That's his fault.
You've reached Ryan Black.
There we go.
I'll
leave him a message. It would have been fun if he can get on, because this story is at his expense, really. Ryan, missing you. I'm talking about the great Tom Atkins, and I was recounting the story on the podcast, talking about Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, and I wanted your input. I wanted you to check me to make sure my memory is correct on how you handled yourself in front of Mr. Atkins. All right, I'll catch up with you later. Bye. Oh, well, you can't win them all. So in any case, here we are. And he was charging at the time, it was $20. $20 to get an autograph, and he was going to take a picture with you. So Ryan puts down his 20, he gets his thing autographed, and boom, gets a picture taken. I put down $20, get my copy of the Fog autographed, and I get a picture with him. And again, to tell you how I can't explain how gracious with his time he was. Granted, it was preview night. There weren't a ton of people there, so there was nobody waiting. How dare he not have a line? But there was nobody really waiting for him, and he just talked. He had great stories to tell, and he was really nice, and there was a connection. And then Ryan, as we were gonna go on to our next. We're going to go on and try to obtain another autograph. Ryan goes to him, "Hey, Mr. Atkins, thank you so much for your time. Hey, would you mind if we both had a picture taken together with you?" Now, I'm going to pause the story right there, because I know my friend Ryan, and I know what he was thinking at the time. And I also knew what Mr. Atkins' response was going to be, which is going to be completely different from what Ryan was hoping for. And so, back to the story, Ryan goes, "Hey, Mr. Atkins, would it be all right if my friend and I got a picture taken with you?" And he said, "Sure, guys, come on back here." And then he paused, took a beat, and said, "That'll be $20. Now, I knew that was coming. Tom Atkins is there to make money. Not necessarily there to make friends. However generous and gentlemanly and kind he was with us, he is there to make money, and my friend is asking him for something in which he makes money from. But Ryan was thinking, "Oh man, we're good friends. We just had this connection. He's a great guy. He's not going to mind taking a picture with the both of us." And then he charged him, and Ryan was kind of putting that rock in a hard place. Like, well, he has to pay now. He has to pay because he can't say, "Oh, well, I'm going to go somewhere else." And he goes, "Oh yeah, okay." And he stammered a little bit, and he gave him $20. We got a picture taken with Tom Atkins, walked away. I was laughing I laughed my head off. And Ron's like, "I can't believe he charged us." And I'm like, "Dude, it's how he makes money." I go, "Of course he's going to charge us." But he did it, Mr. Atkins, that is. He did it in a really nice, cordial way. It was just funny that he took that beat and said, "That'll be $20. So, oh, poor Ryan, but we got the picture. Tom Atkins is great. That's the ode to Tom Atkins, one of cinema's greatest character screen actors it's known. So, I have a question for all of you. So had Halloween 3 Season of the Witch succeeded, do you think we would still have gotten any Michael Myers movies? I think that's fair. Had it been a success, would they have gone back to the Michael Myers well? Had, say, Season of the Witch, and say they did a fourth one, calling it Halloween 4, which became Michael Myers because of the disaster of Halloween Season of the Witch. But let's say in an alternate universe that it was a success, and it even made more money than, say, Halloween 2. Would they have jettisoned Michael Myers to continue on with these movies throughout Halloween? Personally, I think, I think we most likely would have gotten another Michael Myers movie, especially with the popularity of Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger. I mean, Michael Myers, needs to be up on that Mount Rushmore of horror icons, I think, but I think it's something interesting to ponder. So in a way, you can thank the failure of Season of the Witch that we continue to get more Michael Myers stories. But the great thing is that Season of the Witch is available on Blu-ray, and you can watch it as its standalone movie and make your own judgment and opinion. Personally, I feel that the movie has, amongst fans anyways, they've come to accept it. They come to accept it for what it is. And I appreciate that. And they should. Again, I think it's a fun concept that what they were trying. I think Season of the Witch is a fun B sci-fi horror movie. So I think it was a really good idea. It was just poorly put forward. So I will wrap on Halloween 3, and now I will retro rewind back to October 30th, 1981, and that is when we get the direct sequel to Halloween, Halloween 2. Now, this movie was released by Universal Pictures. It should be noted that Universal had now picked up the rights, and they had somewhat of a deal, too, with John Carpenter for movies, and Halloween 2 was going to be their first one. Okay? So Universal Pictures, Halloween 2, it was their first movie, their first horror movie with John Carpenter, who produced and ended up writing and such. He ended up producing Season of the Witch, and then he went on to direct The Thing. So this was Universal Pictures' first, movie in working with a Carpenter. The budget for Halloween 2 is at $2.5 million. Its domestic box office is estimated at $25.5 million. It was directed by Rick Rosenthal, who also worked on the original. The movie was written by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill. I'm going to get back to the writing of the movie in just a bit. Now, the movie brought back pretty much most of the cast. We had Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode, Donald Pleasance as Dr. Sam Loomis. We had Charles Cyphers as Sheriff Lee Brackett. Lance Guest, Mr. Star, he's Starfighter himself, is Jimmy. And I talked about Starfighter, little Halloween connection here. Starfighter, directed by, The Last Starfighter, directed by Nick Castle, stars Lance Guest, who's in Halloween 2. Nick Castle, as we know, played the Shape in the original. Then we had Pamela Susan Shoop as Karen. Leo Rossi was Bud. Amazing Grace. That's as far as I'll go with that. Gloria Gifford was Mrs. Owls. Tawny Moyer as Jill. She meets a very untimely death. You remember, she's the nurse that gets the scalpel in the back and she gets lifted up, right? That scene was redone in H2O, where our counselor, the same thing happens to him, except I think that was a kitchen knife, a big chopping knife. We had the very wonderful Anna Alicia as Janet, And Nancy Stevens came back as Nurse Marion. You remember Marion was the person who was going to Smith's Grove to help Dr. Loomis pick up Michael Myers to take him to court. Then we had Dick Warlock, a stuntman. He dons the mask as the Shape, and they actually used the original mask from Halloween. Just so you know, since I just talked about Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, Dick Warlock was in many a scene in Season of the Witch. He is one of the robotic assassins. He's really cool. So the movie also has in it, in a brief cameo, Jeffrey Kramer. He was Dentist Graham going through the charred remains of a corpse, a victim. And that leads me to another cool connection, and I call it the Jaws connection, because Jeffrey Kramer is probably best known as Deputy Hendricks from the town of Amity in the movies Jaws and Jaws 2. Okay? Who else is in a Jaws movie? Lance Guest. He starred in, unfortunately, Jaws the Revenge. But there's a little bit of a universal Jaws connection right there. So, and just for further info, Lance Guest played Michael Brody, okay, son of Chief Brody. So Halloween 2, the movie, as I said before, this was not a movie that John Carpenter wanted to make. He believed that Halloween is a standalone flick. So, admittedly, even, he begrudgingly wrote the movie with Deborah Hill, and he went on to say that he came up with the brother-sister storyline under the influence of, a lot of beer. Yeah, a lot of beer. And not really knowing where to go with the characters and what more to do. So he's never a great fan of Halloween 2, which it always saddens me when people poo-poo a movie that they worked on, but particularly when it's a movie that wasn't bad. Look, Halloween 2 is for sure not the original Halloween. And I'm going to talk about its differences in a little bit, but it wasn't garbage. It wasn't awful. It was good to see. It was good to see in the theaters and Michael Myers come back again. Quick aside, I had my very first high school date was Halloween 2. Yeah, we went to go see Halloween 2 at what were the General Cinemas in Peabody, Massachusetts. And I had my very first high school date, and I'll share my very first high school kiss happened at Halloween 2. And yeah, it was, for me, Halloween 2 was awesome. It was like the best experience ever that I had. I was flying high for, at least for a little bit of a week, and then she dumped me, and then she went with this other guy who I believe she ended up marrying not too long after high school and college. So yeah, I guess my kiss wasn't that great, but it was a great night for me. I digress. I just thought it would be a fun story to share. Now, going back to, again, John Carpenter didn't really want to do this movie. So he begrudgingly wrote it. He's poo-pooed it. And I was making the point that, if a movie's not that bad, don't poo-poo it. Audiences really like it. So, play to the audience. Just say, hey, this is what happened. Be honest. Say, I didn't want to do it, but you know what? I'm really glad that you kids liked it. I think that's a better way to handle it all around. Because I think audiences generally don't hate Halloween 2. I sure don't hate it. I enjoy it. I like it better than many of the other sequels that came after dealing with Michael Myers. So, and I want to talk a little bit here too about Rick Rosenthal's direction, because if you see how he sets up certain scenes in Halloween 2, most of the plot, its setting takes place in a hospital, Haddonfield Memorial Hospital. And what Rick Rosenthal does is he uses security camera footage, like video footage, to show a character's place in the hospital. And we'll see Michael Myers walking down a hallway, and then as soon as he turns a corner, another character will come into frame from the video camera. It's really interesting when you think about it, because it's a very similar technique that he used in Halloween Resurrection. In which Halloween Resurrection, as I talked about, he used the GoPro camera, the video camera, and set up basically what was Zoom, where people were watching the action live in the Michael Myers house, what was going on. So, in a sense, Halloween 2 was a precursor to his directing for Halloween Resurrection. Now, there was also something that was very famously done back in the day, and to an extent they continue to do this now. They had to film different versions of scenes. This happens, like I said, it happens to an extent today when they're putting say an R-rated movie on network TV, and a character swears or there's some violence. They will reshoot that same scene, replacing the dialogue or editing out the violence or doing something to cut away from the violence so that they can show it on TV and for airplanes too. So there is a television version of Halloween 2 that's included on the disc, and it's really, really quite cool. It actually fills in some of the backstory. There are a few edits in Halloween 2 that I find to be a little questionable. And one of them is when we go from a fully lit hospital to a hospital with no lights, except emergency lights on. And it's never really explained. However, in the television version, you get more of a sense, and it actually brings more of a sense of dread to the situation that's going on to our primary care people and to some of the patients within that hospital. So I do recommend that if you get this disc put out by Shout Factory of Halloween 2, watch the television version. Yes, the violence and swearing is going to be cut out, but you'll see some scenes that are actually, I think, pretty cool. And they're not just filler. They actually add a little bit of character. Personally, I kind of wish that they would take those scenes and insert them into the R-rated version of the movie, because they're not going to affect the rating in any way. They were just filmed to fill up more time, and they had more character. So in any case, that's just me. But another thing that happened during the filming of Halloween 2 is John Carpenter had to sit back. He had to go back into the director chair for a little bit, because that year the networks were planning for Halloween to be on broadcast TV, and they had to edit out the violence. Okay. In doing so, they end up cutting the movie down so that it can't even fill a television time slot properly. The movie was like a very brisk 89 minutes, and cutting out these extra scenes of violence and whatnot, they needed to do something. Now, at the time, I don't know why they didn't just play more advertising. Like, that's what they would do today. I mean, listen, the industry's built on greed. If they cut out too much time, they'd go, well, that's another commercial right there. But they didn't do that. Bringing John Carpenter back into the director's chair to fill in or to film some filler scenes, which is pretty cool. So some of those scenes is Loomis walking down a very long hospital hall and entering a young Michael Myers room. Then there's a scene with Loomis trying to convince these doctors of how dangerous Michael Myers is. I think that scene's really funny because it just has these awkward long pauses, and Loomis walking down the hall, knowing what you know, and watching the scenes, of course they were filler. He was just like, okay, action, walk, keep walking, keep walking, cut, okay, great. And then when Loomis is in front of these two doctors, there are just scenes of them sitting there. Their expressions. That's it. Then there's also Laurie Strode. There's a scene, an extra scene with Laurie Strode in her house coming after her seeing Michael Myers from her bedroom, and he's in the sheets. It's that iconic scene. Linda comes over to ask if she could borrow a blouse. And shortly after Linda comes over, Annie calls and says, hey, can I borrow that blouse? And she's like, well, Linda's here first. I got to give it to her. And then we also get a little bit more of Laurie Strode singing her made-up song, Just the Two of Us. And then there's one other scene that Carpenter filmed, and that's the day after Michael Myers escapes. He's at the hospital in the room in which he escapes with broken glass, and he sees written on the wall in blood the word sister. So all of that was filmed during the filming of Halloween 2. So one thing about Halloween 2, it was made during the rise in popularity of the slasher movie, right? A lot of that was due to Halloween and the year 1980, okay? So when you look at Halloween, the original, and then Halloween 2, number one, on a sequel, in this sequel, there were far more deaths, and they were far gorier, and a lot of them were on camera. And even when you saw, and then sometimes you even got to see a victim who was killed off camera, but you saw the outcome. Dr. Mixter is a great example of this, where Anna Alicia, our nurse, she's going to look for him. She's in his office. She sees, believing that he's sitting in the chair, turns the chair around, and it's Dr. Mixter with a needle. A needle is in his eye, and there's a close-up shot of that. The violence in Halloween 2 is far more than the violence in Halloween, and I believe anyways, that many of you who are horror fans would believe that Halloween, the original, especially compared to today's standards, when it comes to body count and violence, it's you might not be editing out a whole heck of a lot today as you would have back in in the late 70s and 1980s. So I'm going to look at the year quickly for 1980 because it was a big influence. It's what the studios wanted. It's why Halloween 2 was Halloween 2 and why the deaths were gorier. So you can really you can pinpoint 1978 Halloween, but let's look at the year 1980, right? You had John Carpenter's The Fog, which I already spoke about, right? That movie had some pretty violent deaths in it. But then we had the movie that really took off, taking from Halloween. You had Friday the 13th, which opened in the May of 1980. And that movie elevated the slasher film. Okay, we saw things in Friday the 13th that we hadn't seen from a makeup standpoint, from a special effects standpoint, the likes that we really hadn't seen in some time, and they were all there on screen. So in Friday the 13th, we all know that Friday the 13th and the popularity of that franchise, right? But also, 1980 hadn't had its fill of Jamie Lee Curtis, okay? Because in July of 1980, she was in Prom Night, a slasher film. And in October of 1980, she booked a ticket and was on the Terror Train. Jamie Lee Curtis again. And then Friday the 13th Part 2 was released in April of 81, okay? So all of these movies, Jamie Lee Curtis earned her name as Scream Queen, and these all contributed to directing how Halloween 2 was going to be. Now, Rosenthal and Dean Cundey did their best to try to make it as atmospheric and as moody and as suspenseful, actually, as John Carpenter did. There was some neat tricks of the light and shadow, and with the way Michael Myers would stalk or pursue Laurie Strode. They were able to build some good suspense there. But again, it all comes from, the world of which it was, the world at the time, which was slasher, gore, teens in peril, some nudity. There was a little bit of a sex scene and some nudity in Halloween 2. This was all a part of the time, and you can really, the flashpoint of that outside of Halloween was 1980 and then 1981, of course. So now, talking Halloween 2, I want to talk about, there were a lot of deaths in Halloween 2. Far more, as I said, than the original Halloween, okay? But there's one death I felt that is the most tragic death of perhaps even the series, but for sure in Halloween 2, okay? Can anybody guess who I feel the most tragic death in Halloween 2? Was it Janet? No. Was it Bud and Karen? Well, they're never going to have that breakfast that they said they were going to have in the morning. Was it Mrs. Alves? Not really. So who was it? Was it the girl, our first victim of the movie Halloween 2? Nope. In fact, I'm going to even throw out another clue. This person wasn't even killed by Michael Myers. Nope. The person is none other than Ben Tramer. Oh, poor Ben Tramer got hit by a police car and thrown into a van, which exploded. It should be noted, Ben Tramer was wearing a Michael Myers-esque kind of mask when this happened, and he wasn't looking both ways when he was crossing the street while he was being pursued by Dr. Loomis, and whammo! And he goes up in flames. So why is Ben Tramer the most tragic? Well, if you remember the original Halloween, it was Ben Tramer who Laurie Strode had her sights on. She had a crush on Benjamin, and her good friend Annie was trying to set Laurie and Ben up for their date to the senior dance. And that senior dance is not going to happen with Ben Tramer anymore. And to me, that's the most tragic death. Ben Tramer won't be able to go out with Laurie Strode or with anybody, all because he was wearing a silly mask. So there you have that. So for Carpenter, Deborah Hill, and people, Halloween 2, the ending of Halloween 2 is pretty definitive, okay? Michael Myers, aside from getting shot in the eyes, pretty much, and then blowing up in a huge explosion. An explosion, by the way, is which was a little bit bigger than intended in the movie, blowing up Michael Myers and Donald Pleasance. So for Carpenter, he really wanted to put an exclamation mark. This is the last of Michael Myers that I want to be involved with. Done. But as we've learned from this series of podcasts, you can't kill the boogeyman. So that's going to be a wrap for Halloween 3 Season of the Witch and Halloween 2. Next week, I'll be talking and going back to 1978 to talk about the original Halloween and what it started and what it means to me. Again, a big thanks to Scott Menzel, founder, co-founder, along with his wonderful wife, Ashley Menzel. She just celebrated a birthday. And they celebrated an anniversary. A big thanks to Scott for helping produce the show and believing in it. Big shout out to the Hollywood Critics Association for having me and allowing me to be a member of the greatest critics association on the planet, and that is true. And also some shout outs to people. My brother celebrated his 50th birthday today, so happy birthday. It wasn't today, it was this week. but it was a big 5-0, and due to COVID and such, couldn't be together. So I'm sorry for that. But big 50 to my brother. And I want to wish you all well. I hope you're with me for next week. And just do as Michael Myers always does. Please wear a mask. That's all. See you later.